The views expressed on this podcast are ours alone and do not reflect the views of our employers.
Evolution of Evil.
I'd have the sleeping pill mixture already prepared. Person would drink it, fall asleep. That's when they would be strangled.
Do you have a boyfriend?
No.
You never told me your name.
Why do you want to know my name?
I want to know who I'm looking at.
Evil is not spurned. Evil is thought of as a spirit that needs help.
Believe me, if I started murdering people, there'd be none of you left.
Evolution of Evil.
Hello there, and welcome to the True Crime Podcast, Evolution of Evil, the show where we will relive some of the more awful and horrific crimes while also diving into the human psyche that makes these crimes possible. Please remember to subscribe and rate this podcast wherever you get your podcast. Follow the show on Twitter at EvoEvils1E4, as well as our personal accounts. He is at Justin Yen. I am at TStevens91. Hello, Justin.
Hello, TJ. I guess for some of our listeners, we have to explain kind of our hiatus after the first 3 episodes. And so for me, I had to take a mental health break, especially after that deep dive into Eileen Wuornos. Mm-hmm. And I hear you and the boys of the FFP were on a cruise. How was that?
Yeah, we went on the Jericho cruise, and we had a lot of fun. I'm not going to sit here and act like we didn't. The issue, if you're a wrestling fan, and if you're either single or married, either one, and have no kids, I 100% recommend it. You should absolutely do it. If you have kids, don't. And surely don't bring your kids to that cruise like some people did. And I would look at them at karaoke at 12:30 in the morning in the Spinnaker Lounge. But the reason why I say that is, now granted, our cruise ship was supposed to stop in the Bahamas. It did not, because the night we were supposed to dock, it stormed. So instead, we just essentially did laps in between the Cayman Islands and Florida. Never got off the ship until we got off the ship at the end. So, but by Saturday night, I was very homesick, and I still had a day to go. So a lot of fun. The comedians were excellent. If you're looking for new comedians to kind of get into, Kate Quigley was on that cruise. She was fantastic. There was Raj Sharma, who was phenomenal, and Jeff Dye, who Brad Williams hosted it, and Jeff Dye, in my opinion, stole the weekend. Not only was he absolutely hilarious, but he actually hung out with us. And I don't mean just us, because on night one, we were in the hot tub with Jeff Dye, Brad Williams, and Kate Quigley. That did happen. But he was just out and about the whole time. And Austin Gunn was out and about the whole time, hanging out at the pool or the hot tub. Wardlow, I saw way more Wardlow than I expected. But really, other than those two, and Colton came around a couple times, but other than that, didn't really see anyone. So it's not like you're just mingling with the wrestlers and the comedians, stuff like that. But it was a great time. They have a lot of fun events to do and wrestling shows to watch on the pool deck. It was fun. But if you have kids, I'd wait until they were older, or you can find a babysitter for the week, because it was bad. I was very homesick by the end of it.
So basically, it was a Rock and Rager or Daytona Spring Break on a cruise line, huh?
Yeah, that's actually perfect. Yes.
All right. Well, sounds good. Well, I think it's good we take breaks every, so often, and hopefully we will be bringing weekly podcasts to our listeners. But I definitely felt we needed it, and I think after the cruise, you needed some time with your family, so. We try to respect that, and mental health is important for people as well. So
absolutely. especially in a show like this.
Yeah. And, we go right back into the frying pan with this episode. So if you're ready, I am.
I really didn't. I don't know why I didn't expect this, but I didn't expect to be in episode 5. Is this 5?
No, this is 4. This is 4.
I can't count. I didn't expect to be in episode 4. So now I've done 2, you've done 1. This is your second one.
Right.
I didn't expect you to surprise me, but literally the first story you did, the Gainesville Ripper, I knew very little about. This story, I recognized the name. Outside of that, nothing. I don't know very much of this story. And like I told you before we went on the air, I read the first paragraph and grabbed 3 beers and put them on the desk. It's going to be heavy. And the next one, which I don't want to give away, but the next one you just told me about you're going to do, no idea about it. So you've surprised me 3 times now in their first 3 episodes. And apparently I need to step up my game because I'm going pretty mainstream here so far.
Well, I can't say that I can take credit for this episode. So remember, you did give me the idea for Dr. Death.
Yes.
Harold Shipman. So it was one of my options.
When you told me his story, I was like, you absolutely have to do that one.
Yeah. So let's see and go from there. I'm ready if you are.
I'm as ready as I'm going to get.
All right. Well, crack open your first beer. And if not, take a sip. For this week's episode, we're going across the pond, but sticking with almost the same timeline as our previous serial killers. We're going to cover Harold Shipman. Shipman is often referred to as Dr. Death or the Angel of Death, is one of the UK's most notorious serial killers who murdered approximately 250 people in the span between 1975 and 1998. Before we get into the gruesome details, let's dig into Shipman's childhood like we normally do.
Now, before you go any farther, I feel like we should put that 250 number in context. So I believe the most prolific serial killer in the United States history was Gary Ridgway, the Emerald River Killer. I think he got to 49. 5 times as much.
Yeah, so you'll find out throughout the episode how many they were able to prove and then how many they suspect. So at this point, they approximate 250 people.
Do we? So you're saying there's more than they know of. This is not a Henry Lee Lucas situation where he just admits to every murder that's ever been committed.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So Shipman was born in 1946 on January 14th in Nottingham, England, to Vera and Harold Shipman Sr. Both were working class citizens and devout Methodists. He was the second of 4 children, but it was said that he was Vera's favorite from the very beginning. So she was described as an overbearing but loving mother who only wanted the best for her children. She wanted them to each succeed and be able to escape the impoverished area that they were actually living in. Harold, being Vera's favorite, wanted nothing more than to make her proud and make her dream of him succeeding become a reality. He was blessed with intelligence and drive, which ultimately led him to get a scholarship to a local private boarding school at such a young age. So it was said that although Shipman may not have been blessed with money, Vera's ability to be domineering as a parent also instilled in them the sense of superiority, which would only enhance in Harold once he continued in his private boarding school. Now, what that means is basically he got there and thought he was a bum. He then came back home into his impoverished area, and then the friends that he had, basically he just treated them like they were nothing because he was better than them because he was at a boarding school. While he was there, he became accustomed to hanging with different class of people than those that he was used to in his neighborhood. He started drifting away from his friends, like I said. He was athletic. He qualified for the rugby team and ended up being quite good at it. However, those who witnessed Harold on and off the field stated it was almost like a different person on the field, one that was more aggressive, violent, almost if it was a whole different person. He also took to running at a young age, and they said it was almost like it was his release from stress. So it's weird. Um, you know, when I read that, when I was researching, all I can think of is American Psycho. Every time he just changed into a different person, right? And so I don't know if this is just an indicator of what's to come for Harold. Like there's a darker side in him at a young age, and that's how he kind of took it out, was through sports. But we'll get into maybe the deal breaker for him that could potentially have caused him to break.
Yeah, hearing someone has a different, more aggressive and violent personality on the field, especially with something like rugby, it's not an immediate alarm to me. Because I can just tell you from personal experience, playing high school football, I was a dick on the football field. So I did things I would not normally do. So that's not a huge alarm. Now, when you add that with the disassociation from his childhood friends, that might be adding up to something, but just that on its own doesn't alarm me right out of the gate.
Yeah, no, I get you. So if you remember correctly, Harold was Vera's favorite child, his mom, right? His main goal growing up was to make her proud and be successful in what she had set the goal for, which was to be successful enough for him to get himself out of the area that they were currently living in and make something of himself. He was doing great, and he was actually on track to do so. But at the age of 17, the family got devastating news. Vera actually had an advanced late stage of lung cancer, and she didn't have very long to live. Especially back then, there wasn't a lot of advancement to help. So she was bedridden within a month. And if you remember, Harold's father was the only one working. With that being said, it was up to poor Harold Jr. To take care of his mother. He had already shown interest in the medical field, and his older sister had moved out of the family home. So basically, while she was in her final stages of life, he continued to be her caretaker, making sure that he was paying attention to the doctor's appointments, reading doctor's notes, being able to remember what to report back to his father in case his mother was not able to. At one of her appointments, the doctor informed Vera and Harold Jr. that she was terminal, that it was coming time to the end. Can you imagine how devastating that is to hear that your mother, the one that's, pretty much your best friend, your everything, right? And she's not got long to live at all. So
I haven't had that happen. My mother has been diagnosed with cancer 3 separate times. First time I was 7, but none of them were obviously terminal. She's still alive, but a lot happened here. A lot happened in a small amount of time at a young age. So we have what they call a stressor here, with the mother becoming terminally ill and ultimately passing away. I know we haven't got there yet, but foreshadowing a bit. But add to that the responsibility of also being the caretaker. So you're front row for everything, all the ugly things that happen. So it's a lot of stress on one man's mind. Again, it doesn't excuse what he's going to do. And again, I don't know. I'm with you guys on this one. I'm along for the ride, but a lot of stress here in a short amount of time.
Yep. No, I get you. So not only is he hearing that his mother's going to die, but if you remember, he's made her his whole world since he was a young boy, and due to their relationship. I know he had been devastated. The doctor discussed with him pretty much how to keep her comfortable, which meant watching his mother receive morphine injections to ease her pain. Some suspect between watching his mother slowly die and constantly receive morphine injections, this is where young Harold may have been inspired later with his killing spree. Now, TJ, I'm not going to justify what any of our 3 subjects have done, because trust me, there's absolutely no justification for any of these pile of dungs that lived on this earth. But this is the 3rd serial killer that has suffered some type of traumatic event at an early age.
Yes, and they all vary in types and severity, but I mean, all three have been severe. And what's interesting, I mean, Eileen definitely did just horrible things, but Belle Gunness really didn't have that, and you have it here. And I've mentioned before in a previous episode that Jeffrey Dahmer didn't really have that. Ted Bundy didn't really have that. So it's common, but it's not required. And the morphine thing. If I'm listening right now in my car driving somewhere and I hear constantly receiving morphine injections to ease pain, I'm gonna bookmark that in my mind because I think that's going to become important later.
And it just may. So let's fast forward a little bit. June 21st, 1963. That's another important date. That's the date that his mother passed away. Shipman was absolutely devastated. He was more determined than ever to make sure that he actually honored his mother's wish to get out of that environment and make something of himself. So the good news is he actually did. I don't know if it's good news or bad news after knowing what I know, right? But he was able to qualify for the scholarship to the Leeds School of Medicine. It was while there he was able to meet and marry a woman named Primrose 2 years later in 1965. At the time, Primrose was 17 and 5 months pregnant at the time of their wedding with his child. He would then later graduate medical school at 1970. And 4 years later, after graduating, he would start working at the Pontefract General Infirmary as a general practitioner in the same town. It was mentioned in my research that Shipman was now a father of two and a proud family man at that time. It was later said, and his wife would have a total of 4 children, 3 boys and 1 girl. However, shortly after, in 1975, after taking the job at the Pontefract General Infirmary, Shipman was actually caught forging prescriptions of a drug, pethidine, which was eventually found out to be for his own use. Now, I'm sure y'all are wondering what the hell is pethidine. I kind of wondered the same thing. It's an opioid that's ultimately for pain relief. The medicine was highly used back in the UK and Australia to help with labor pains and isn't used as often due to over time, Big Pharma has created a safer and newer pain relief that isn't as addicting as what pethidine is. Pretty much, it's as addicting as an opioid would be, right? So, having been caught for the forgery and addiction, he was sent to rehab. He was terminated. He was fined and convicted for forging prescriptions. Obviously, you don't think he's going to get a job in that same town and hired for what he did.
No, when you hear stuff like this in these stories, you're like, boy, I hope the next sentence is, and then he became a garbage man. But that is never what happens. They pop up somewhere else and continue the same thing. And also, I said the pain relief thing, keep that in the back of your head. I got a feeling this is not the last time we're going to hear that.
Yeah, and let me just clarify your statement. So you'd hope that he'd become a garbage man. He actually was a garbage man of a human, and he continues to be a garbage man of a human being after. So if you think about it,
if I had an applause sound on this website, I would be playing it right now. That was excellent.
So TJ, here he is. He's 29 years of age. He's married, 2 kids, fighting an opioid addiction, fined and convicted of forgery, and having to face his wife and family and look for employment. So with that, he did what he thought he needed to do, and he started looking elsewhere. He was able to find employment in the following years in Hyde, which is a town outside of Pontefract. And basically, he got employment at the Donnybrook Medical Center. So this is where he attempted to do damage control to his reputation. However, some of his junior colleagues found him quite smug. However, if you think about it, it wasn't something that was uncommon for him based off of his schooling. So Shipman, that is, you know, it's the same smug cut. 1, 2, 3. However, some say the junior colleagues found him the same smug Shipman that his classmates and friends from back home had described. Now, all seems normal as Shipman lasted at this medical center for almost 2 decades. So if you think about it, Shipman was able to fly under the radar for a long time if he was doing anything during this time. He then moved on and set up his own private practice around 1993. Now, I'm not sure if you realize, but in order to set up your own private practice, you would have to have had the confidence in yourself and the ability to build a large patient following, or else you wouldn't take the risk. Shipman felt that this was possible, as he had built a really strong reputation within the community as a good physician and had what most would call a great bedside manner. So at this point, you're probably asking, at what point does Dr. Death start killing? Would you be surprised if I told you his first victim was taken back in 1975, right before he was caught forging prescriptions for himself?
Yes, that would surprise me.
Would you be even more surprised and shocked that it wouldn't be until 1998 that someone started getting suspicious of Shipman?
No, that one does not surprise me.
Yeah.
So, someone that could become a doctor and then maintain a job for 20 plus years and then make his own practice, no, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, it's crazy. You would think like it's the safest thing to go see your doctor, right? And I don't know. I kind of second guess why people have fears of doctor now and white coat syndrome, right? So let me tell you how the suspicion started. Well, first, if you get to know Hyde, it has a population of 34,000, and at least it did in 2011. It's a small town in the UK. With it being a small town, similarities start getting noticed or start standing out. Started happening when the local undertaker, not the one in the WWE, started to see that out of all the medical professionals in town, Shipman had the highest death rate of anybody else. Now, we're not saying it was 2 or 3 more than other professionals. From what I researched, it was more than 10 times that of his peers. It was high. That's absolutely crazy. The victims ranged in differences of ages, but shared some similarities. They often happened in the middle of the afternoon while they were at home alone, often with the patient sitting up in the chair or the bed, completely clothed. So let's talk about the victims. I'll start with the one that actually ended up getting them caught, and we'll go from there.
Hold on. Before you do that, I'm still stuck on death count 10 times higher than his peers.
Yeah.
So what is the number that you have to accomplish before someone goes like, hey, I don't think this guy's any good at this. We might need to look into this young man a little bit more. He seems to be killing way more patients than saving.
Well, so let me explain a little bit further. So when the medical examiner gets there, right, they have to then go to the primary care physician to sign off on everything. So basically, it's not like, hey, I'm killing them personally, and I have 10 times more. It's like when you look at it, 10 times more patients are the ones coming from Shipman's office than Freud's office or anybody else's office. And so basically he is signing 10 times more death certificates than anybody else. So it's not like a blatant, like, hey, let's look. It's like, hey, there's a coincidence here. Let's look even further into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this case where he gets caught is absolutely insane, and how he thought he wasn't going to get caught is beyond me.
I'm excited.
And if he was this sloppy through all of them, I don't know how he didn't get caught sooner. So let's talk about Kathleen Grundy. She was the 81-year-old victim and the former mayor of Hyde. And like I said, she's really the victim that really set in motion Shipman getting caught. Grundy, like the other victims, was healthy. She was also very well off, and I tell you that so you keep that in the back of your mind. Grundy passed peacefully soon after, and I put peacefully in air quotes for you if you're not watching, soon after Dr. Shipman visited her at her house on June 24th, 1998. Now, as you know, the primary care is usually consulted when a patient dies by the coroner. This played to the Shipman's favor, usually. In this case, Shipman was able to rule the death as natural causes and advise the coroner that an autopsy was not even needed. So basically, grieving her daughter, Angela Woodruff, an attorney who was in charge of her mother's affairs, agreed to bury her mother and start the mourning process, and agreed not to have an autopsy. So, at this point, Shipman thinks he's getting away with it. Well, TJ, imagine her surprise when she went to start getting everything together and reviewing the will. She was able to find that another will had actually been established. TJ, one guess who the beneficiary was?
Dr. Death Steve Williams.
Nope. How about Dr. Death Harold Shipman?
Oh, this one.
Yeah.
This is how it always unravels.
Yes.
Greed is what always takes him down.
So imagine you grieving the loss of your loved one and now finding out that the doctor that is in charge of keeping your loved one healthy is actually plotting to murder them and profit from their demise. And I say plotting because no one takes the time to get another will established, forges that, and then follows through with the murder, right? It's either you kill them because you're a killer or you're premeditating everything. This one is
or you're Anna Nicole Smith.
Like my body. So obviously, Angela, the daughter, was hurt and confused and went directly to the authorities to report it to them to start investigating as she felt the second will was forged. So this really set the ball in motion for the investigation to start against Dr. Shipman. So imagine this. She goes to the police. The police instantly open the investigation. Now, remember, they just buried Kathleen Grundy, so she's freshly under the dirt. The first thing that they were able to do was get her daughter's permission to dig or exhume the body and actually start running an autopsy. I think if they did, like, if she were to cremate Grundy, I don't think we would have been where we are today. So basically, once the autopsy was done, the results came back. It was determined that Grundy had actually passed away of a morphine overdose within 3 hours of her death. So, which corresponded with the same time frame that Dr. Shipman was with Grundy. So with this information in their hands, they proceeded to get a search warrant for Shipman's home and office. The search warrant was extremely successful as it helped law enforcement find medical records, amongst other things. But TJ, do you want to know what the weirdest piece of evidence that they found during the search warrant?
There's been so many good ones over the years. I mean, Jeffrey Dahmer had his dissolved barrel. Trophies are a thing. Now, is this something he just kept, or like what type of evidence is this?
So I would say it's damning piece of evidence based off of what he was doing with Grundy.
Let's see. The hospice forged a will. I know that, like, well, I'm thinking of a college degree. I almost said calligraphy. That's college degree. I don't know. You got me. What is it?
So it was a typewriter, and basically, so they found the typewriter and were able to match it to the forged documents. So documents like prescriptions and the will of Kathleen Grundy. So this, along with the information from the local undertaker's office, law enforcement felt that there was a bigger case than just the murder of Mrs. Grundy. So with this, law enforcement started looking into the deaths of all of Dr. Shipman's patients.
So wait, he was using the same typewriter for the will as he was the prescriptions?
Not for the first one that he got caught for, but new prescriptions. Yes.
What a dope.
Yeah. Well, he was smart, but he was also smug. So remember, he just thought he can get away with everything.
Yes.
Yeah. So they then separated the patients by those that were cremated and those that were not. The reason being, those patients that were already cremated could not be exhumed and examined for foul play. Law enforcement then went to the potential victims' families that weren't cremated to seek permission to open the investigation further into Dr. Shipman. Can you imagine receiving that phone call? Hey, I know that you've already grieved your so-and-so's loss, but now we're going to go ahead and pick off the scab of the womb and completely tell you that it wasn't natural causes. It could have been a murder, and we're going to completely have you re-grieve the situation.
Yeah. And I don't mean to laugh, but yeah, so we know your dad died 48 years ago, and we thought it was natural causes. Well, turns out the doctor may have killed him and a county worth of people, and we're looking into it now. So,
yeah,
good looking out.
So, what they were able to find, pretty much there was not a family that said no, but what they were able to find was 14 other victims that they were able to prove and go to trial for, with the potential for a total of up to 250 total victims for the doctor. So if you think about it, the reason they weren't able to confirm how many total was a lot of them were cremated back in the time. So based off my research and information from allthat'sinteresting.com, this was a quote I thought was pretty interesting. A police expert also checked Shipman's surgery computer and discovered that he had made false entries to support the fake causes of death he gave on his victims' death certificates. Simultaneously, Shipman insisted that Grundy was addicted to a drug like morphine or heroin and pointed to his notes as evidence for this. However, police found that Shipman had written the notes on his computer after her death. So not only would he kill them, he would make it look like they had an illness they didn't have or an addiction they didn't have either. So, hey, grandma over there, she's addicted to morphine, but never was addicted to morphine.
That's the one that that grabbed me, was this 81-year-old retired mayor.
Yep, shooting up morphine every week.
At the age of 80, picked up heroin addiction. Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah,
well, not heroin, morphine.
No track marks, nothing. So
what are we talking about?
Yeah. So in my opinion, this man is just pure evil. Law enforcement then started going back further into his patient files and matching patients to the pattern of those that passed away peacefully, unexpected, and tried to find out how many Dr. Shipman was actually responsible for. Believe it or not, they feel that one of Shipman's first victims was Edith Roberts back in 1975 when he first started in practice and started becoming addicted to opioids himself. Edith was under Shipman's care as he was her primary care physician. So TJ, imagine the shock of her family when Edith, in her mid-60s and in good health, passes away due to cardiac arrest, or what Shipman labeled as cardiac arrest. Robert's family was assured while she passed of a heart attack, she did not suffer and went peacefully again. To give you an even more descriptive picture of her death, picture Edith lying in bed, reading a book, and then peacefully passing away. I almost want to just ask Shipman, and you'll find out it's too late to do that, but did his mother pass away with a book in her hand? Like, what is the fetish with his patients passing away peacefully with the book in her hand, you know?
That was my first thought with the victim he got caught for, Kathleen Grundy, was the age and the way it seemed like he was reenacting the death of his mother. And I wonder if that's in fact what he's doing.
Yeah. So like I said, keep in mind what I said before. She was in good health prior to passing While not uncommon, you will find that it's what all his victims have in common. All died too soon and were not in poor health, and not looking to end their suffering either. So Shipman had a habit of killing his patients and making it look natural. It happened in the middle of the afternoon while they were at home alone, often with the patient sitting up in a chair or in a bed, fully clothed, as if it was a sudden instant and came out of nowhere. So let's do one of my infamous recaps. Can't really be too infamous since this is my second episode, but we're going to make it a habit. Law enforcement has finally circled in on Shipman after evidence started to pile up. The local undertaker has started to notice that Shipman ultimately had 10 times more patients passing than his peers, and ultimately the death of Kathleen Grundy and all of the evidence they were able to capture from his medical files and the typewriter he utilized to forge documents, including Mrs. Grundy's will. With all the evidence piling up, the local municipality felt that they had enough evidence to take him to court and eventually convict him of murder. So, at that point, they arrest Dr. Shipman. At this point, you would think, hey, he's smart. He's going to be able to cooperate. Might try to save himself, right? Well, Dr. Shipman had previously been very uncooperative with law enforcement during their questioning. And as his normal self, was even very smug to close his eyes and yawn when they showed him photographs of his patients and his victims.
Oh, it's a solid tactic in interrogation.
Yeah. So I don't know. This guy just continues to get more evil and evil. No emotion other than just yawn.
So we've seen again. This people like this keep recycling through serial killer stories constantly too. This God complex thing people have going on, and they become just so assured in their just divine wisdom and intelligence over the rest of the planet that they think they can say and do everything, and everything they're doing, including there's got to be a reason why he was yawning at the photographs of the victims. But the issue is these people think they're so smart that when they're doing stuff to outsmart the investigators, they're actually doing stupid shit. Like yawning at the victim's photographs is probably the worst thing you could do in an interrogation, because it just, why would you, anyone who's truly innocent is going to be horrified at those pictures. Not like, listen, man, I've got some handball to play today. Is this almost done? I don't know these people. I just, that, and he's not the only one. I've heard this a few times. And they just think they're so smart that they're just constantly outsmarting the room, and they get in trouble because they do stupid things.
Yeah. It's tough when you're the smartest guy in the room, So basically, if you thought that attitude was going to change at the trial, you're definitely mistaken. His trial started actually on October 5th, 1999, in the Preston Crown Court. He was standing trial for not only the murder of Mrs. Grundy, but they decided to tack on the other 14 murders as well. So based off my research from Crime Investigation in the UK, they stated that Shipman's defense tried the case in 3 different phases: the physical evidence phase, cases without physical evidence, and then the Mrs. Grundy case. So they figured they could probably get him off on maybe one. I think they could probably prevent maximum jail time, by trying him that way. Their attempt to reduce the number of murders he committed would definitely reduce any potential sentence that they had. However, the prosecution felt they had a very strong case and that Shipman ultimately had a God complex that made him want to control the fate of those in his care. Now, some of you are asking, let's rewind, is this UK's version of Dr. Jack Kevorkian? the U.S. doctor that was assisting his patients that were terminal, helping them with what's called physician-assisted suicide? The answer is definitely not. None of his patients were terminal. I wanted to make sure that we got that in there, and none of them were suffering with an illness that would cause them to want to end their life willingly. He made it look like that when he was forging their documents. However, none of them were ill, none of them were addicted to anything, and none of them wanted to die.
Yes, and even though that part of this doesn't make sense to us, you want to, all right, say somehow I can do brain Olympics and make myself understand why he's killing these women based off of how his mother died. Because what he's doing here is he's reenacting the death of his mother, even though they're not ill. They don't need to be. They are in his head. He has convinced himself, believe it or not, these people are terminally ill. They need to be peacefully put down. And if you don't, no one's ever going to understand how people do that. But I mean, I've heard of serial killers killing people trying to stop an earthquake. So again, the mental gymnastics the brain will do to justify acts like this. That's what interests me in stuff like this, because it's bananas. Perfectly healthy people. And yes, the situation with your mother was terrible, but somehow his brain took the incident with his mother and wrapped it up and made it somehow this being acceptable in his mind. That's what draws me into stuff like this.
Yeah, and it's almost like those horror movies, like where they see other people. It's almost, did he see his mother in them each time? And I don't want to get in this guy's head. Trust me, 250 people down. I don't want to live in that guy's brain at all.
No.
But yeah, it's just creepy as it can be. The good news is the prosecution, like I said, felt that they had a strong case, and started off by calling Grundy's daughter as their first witness. Can you imagine coming right out of the gate with the strongest witness that they can have that can actually take down Dr. Death?
Never happens.
Well, they definitely did it to start off with, and with an impact and catch the attention of the jury. Grundy's daughter, Angela Woodruff, testified how she was an advocate for her mother, even after her mother's death. So pretty much she could have given up and just said, hey, the doctor said no autopsy was needed. Kind of said, hey, maybe she did have another will. Maybe she had the hots for the doctor or something like that, and just kind of gone with the fact. But basically, she talked about how things didn't seem right, and how even more so that she was surprised that there was a second will, and it was conveniently in the name of Dr. Shipman. She was able to set up the prosecution to then call an expert witness in forgery that would then testify that the second will listing Dr. Shipman as the sole beneficiary was indeed a forgery. Even further, they called in a fingerprint analyst, who then confirmed by no means did Grundy ever touch the document. So this was damning for the defense's phase when it came to the Grundy case. The prosecution decided to put even more of a nail in the coffin by calling the next expert witness a computer analyst that worked for the local law enforcement. This expert witness, TJ, would then go on to testify about Shipman altering his patient records to reflect illnesses after the patient passed away to assist with cause of death and throw suspicion off his hot trail. Ultimately, Shipman was found unanimously guilty on all 15 counts of murder and the smaller charge of forgery on January 31st, 2000. With that, he was sentenced to 15 life sentences and 4 years due to the forgery. The judge wanted to make sure that Shipman never saw the light of day again, so he ensured that the forgery got increased from the 4 years that was originally done to 16 consecutive life sentences with no chance of probation. Shipman would actually be incarcerated at Durham prison, and he wouldn't last long in jail as he took his life on his birthday, January 14th, 2004. If you think back to the start of the episode, we started with Shipman being born on January 14th, 1946. So that's right, he took his life on his 58th birthday. He left behind his wife and 4 children. TJ, I think this is the first serial killer that we've covered that had a family, a personal family, like not an indirectly one. But basically, how often it was it for them to have to live with the fact that their loved one thought so little of life that he would take the lives of others. And not only that, how selfish was he that after having a beautiful family, he continued his killing spree and risked damaging his loved ones. And I go back to it even more. He thought so little of life that he didn't even think of the life that he had. He didn't even cherish that. So it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the unfortunate part is usually when people like this have a family and they've spent years cultivating relationships, finding a partner, marrying them, having children. A lot of the times it's a cover, or it's a separate life. I mean, Belle Gunnis had a family, but she kept throwing them into the pig pen throughout her life. But I mean, Bundy he wasn't married. He got married in prison to some weirdo, but he had a girlfriend who had a kid, and John Wayne Gacy was married with 3 kids. Did his wife have 3 kids? I think it was 3 kids. So Gacy was owned his own construction business and was on the Democratic committee in Chicago, very involved in the public. It's perception. It's a cover.
Mm-hmm.
So when this, again, he only got caught because he got greedy. If he doesn't forge the will, who knows? He may never get caught. But it's when the hammer comes down, they do catch him, and they start interviewing people. Oh, there's no way Harold would do that. He's a family man, great at his practice, even though a lot of people die. That's coincidence, but
it's just in the career that he does.
Yeah, I mean, but he's got wife, kids he takes care of. Nice guy, keeps his grass mowed, like just top of the line dude. And that's why. And then it's the funny part is elaborate of a scheme as that sounds, and it is. I'm not trying to make it sound like it isn't, but if you find that one loose string in the connection of his life and just pull it a little bit, it falls apart almost immediately. The first sign, I'm sure, when the police started nosing around about the forgery thing and started asking questions, I'm sure he was a completely different person at home because he knew it was over. It was coming crashing to a halt. And it's again, how people think they're capable of doing outsmarting everyone on the planet at all times never ceases to amaze me.
Like I go back to when you think you're the smartest one in the room, you don't think there's someone smarter, and then really hurts when you fall hard from that pedestal.
Correct.
When you find someone else is. So I know we've talked about not going so dark for our next couple episodes, and I totally agree. I'm definitely not covering somebody who butchers and kills 250 people.
That's crazy.
Like you with Warnos, I'm going to need to take a break from the extremely dark.
Yes.
Cover maybe something current and less dark. And I'm going to ask you, what do you think you have for episode number 5?
Well, I put the poll out earlier this week, and what I did was I picked my 4 favorite Netflix documentaries that are not like, the interview tapes of Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy. Because I really want to, again, I want to save those guys for down the road. I don't want to waste them all in the beginning. So I listed my 4 favorite true crime docuseries for topics. I don't like just straight hour and 45-minute documentaries. I prefer a series. More time. They can get more in depth with the different topics and subjects and people and stuff like that. But so I listed Murder Among the Mormons, which is possibly the most batshit crime story I've ever heard, outside of D.B. Cooper and Lady in the Dale, which I will get to one day. What else did I have on there? Our Father, The Keepers, which is kind of dark, but it's also crazy. And then what was the 4th one I had? I don't even remember anymore. I probably should have pulled it up. That's what a professional would do. I know I just watched it. Anyway, so what not important. So Murder Among the Mormons won. So I'm getting ready to start researching old Mark Hoffman for next weekend's episode, and then we will do that. But I was talking to you about the poll, and you didn't know much about Our Father.
Mm-mm.
And when I explained the story, actually, I'm not even sure I explained the story. I think I just told you it took place in Indiana.
Yeah.
And you were immediately like, well, if it's in Indiana, you have to do it. So I'm doing Murder Among the Mormons is my next show. And then the one after that's going to be the story of Our Father, which if you don't know it, do me a favor. Do not watch the documentary before I talk about it. Let me talk about it first, then watch the documentary, because it's not serial killer gross, but it's literally like icky. I can't believe you did that gross.
Yeah, so I posted the same poll on my Facebook because I like to make sure that we cover all socials, right?
And I don't have Facebook because I think it's evil. So
I get it. If it wasn't for my work with St. Jude, I probably wouldn't have social media. So
I understand.
But anyway, Our Father was one of the ones that was voted on the most, besides the one that you're doing. So I think, I think it's good. And I think just to give you a preview of our 6th episode that I'm currently writing, I've already started to research the Murdaugh trial that's currently going on in South Carolina. So I think we're going to have some pretty good coming episodes.
Yes.
And, I'll probably put out a poll for episode number, it'll be episode number 8 that I'll be writing after that. So, we're always up for feedback and, suggestions on what you'd like to see us write about and podcast about. But TJ, any final words for our faithful listeners?
Yeah, real quick. I just looked up the poll. The other choice was Evil Genius. And if you don't know about that story, it's this twisted like scavenger hunt. They put this man on, well, allegedly. The more you look into it, maybe not so much. He might have been a part of it. But essentially a man is forced to rob a bank with a bomb around his neck. And it is absurd. It's a very absurd. I might just do all 4 of them in a row because I want to cover all 4 of them. So maybe that's just what I'll do. I'll do Murder Among the Mormons, and I'll do Our Father, and then The Keepers, and then I'll end this Netflix month with Evil Genius because it's the craziest crime story I've ever heard.
It is twisted. I've seen that one.
Well, because I said about Murder Among the Mormons, that one is crazy, but I didn't know nerd shit could get so violent because there's a lot of nerdy stuff going on in that one, and it gets weirdly violent. But this one's just like, who thought of that? Like, if you use that brain power, that genius you used to do this, you could cure diseases. But yet you fastened. Yeah, never mind. I'm not going to explain it right now. I'm going to save it. But yes, all 4 are going to be very good. All our episodes are going to be. We're not going to pick a bad one.
Oh no, I think we're going to be in a good spot. So
this week we're going to discuss Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yes, I think it was Jessica.
I love Jessica.
So,
she's a ginger, and I got a soft spot for gingers.
Yep. So TJ, take us home. Any final words for our listeners?
Make sure to follow the show on Twitter at EvoEvils1E4. You can follow him on Twitter at Justin Yin. I am at TCWins91. We will see you next Saturday right here on the Evolution of Evil when I come back with Murder Among the Mormons.
The views expressed on this podcast are ours alone and do not reflect the views of our employers.
Evolution of Evil.
I'd have the sleeping pill mixture already prepared. Person would drink it, fall asleep. That's when they would be strangled.
Do you have a boyfriend?
No.
You never told me your name.
Why do you want to know my name?
I want to know who I'm looking at.
Evil is not spurned. Evil is thought of as a spirit that needs help.
Believe me, if I started murdering people, there'd be none of you left.